But let's get to Georgia's investigation into former President Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. A forewoman for the grand jury now says that they recommended multiple indictments. The grand jury's findings now in the hands of Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis as she considers pressing charges. When asked if former President Trump could be indicted, the forewoman reportedly said, quote, "You're not going to be surprised. It's not rocket science," end quote. Joining us right now to break down what that could mean and what could be in the sealed portions of the final report, Washington Post columnist Philip Bump. Thank you so much for being with us. So enlighten all of the people watching this morning. What's the no-brainer here that she's hinting at?
Well, I think the no-brainer that she's hinting at is that there is a recommended indictment for Trump. That certainly doesn't mean that there's going to be an indictment. A special grand jury doesn't have the power to indict in Georgia, but that they recommended that. So people will remember this was triggered by the call that Trump made shortly before January 6th, trying to pressure state officials in the state of Georgia to find the votes that he needed in order to be declared the victor there. According to the forewoman, the investigation that the special grand jury undertook went further than that and went to other areas in which Donald Trump tried to affect the outcome of the election in the state, including, for example, the fake elector scheme. So there's a broad range of people who are incorporated into those actions who might be on the long list that she'd mentioned of people for whom they recommended indictment.
But this is such a conversation that it's like, okay, people could say that former President Trump was on a witch hunt, right? Trying to prove that there was some type of ballot tampering or election fraud. He says, listen, I had to do my due diligence as the leader of this country to make sure that we had a safe and honest election. Now he's saying it's a witch hunt against him. Is there any truth to that?
No, there's not. I mean, this is by the time that he made this call in early January, the election in Georgia had already been adjudicated multiple times, including a hand ballot recount of the ballots that had been cast in that state. There was no indication there was any substantial fraud. There were people telling Donald Trump that there were no indications of fraud. There were people telling the press there were no indications of fraud. There was no reason at that time for Donald Trump to think that there was fraud. Nonetheless, he called the state of Georgia and asked them to find these votes, right? The implication of that, the subtext to it is not hidden. And so it's very obvious from the phone call itself, which was, made available to the Washington Post fairly soon afterward, what was at play here. And so, yeah, I mean, Donald Trump has long tried to argue that the deep state is out to get him, in part so that he has a counter argument in situations like this. So he can say, oh, look, they're just out to get me again, when in fact there are real questions about his actions.
Philip Bump from the Washington Post. We appreciate your time here. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.